Welcome.
On one of our recent episodes before we took a break, we spoke about social unrest being the next big thing, and that's exactly what we're seeing worldwide at the moment, and particularly the United States is a hotspot. And if you think about COVID-19, which is a virus, a disruption within the body, and how the body has this immune response where it detects that something's not right, there's a disturbance in the body, and it sends the immune system's fighters, I guess, to deal with whatever it is. You can extend that analogy to society, and so social unrest is really an example of a social immune response. And whenever we see people protesting, people being disobedient in some way, then we should recognise that, okay, something's not right. There's an issue, a problem with life conditions somewhere that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed in a very constructive and positive and non-violent way. So at the moment, what we're seeing is very, very similar to what happened back in the late 1950s and through the 1960s, when we saw an early wave of layer 6 values flaring up within society. And these changes, these large-scale changes that we're dealing with here, are very wave-like in the way they emerge. And you can think about the tide coming in on a beach, and you'll see the waves run up the beach and then they recede again, and then the next wave will run up the beach a little bit further and then recede again. So it's a gradual backwards and forwards process of emergence, and then or a falling away, and then a re-emergence. And the 1960s were a fairly significant emergence of the very same values that are sweeping the world at this time. And it's good to look back and just understand that, and it makes sense of a lot of what is going on right at the moment, because a lot of the issues and the themes around those issues are almost exactly the same to what we saw in the 60s.
And there's been a replay, I guess it must be, of a 2016 movie on SBS here in Australia just recently, and you may well have seen it wherever you are in the world. It's a well-known movie called I Am Not Your Negro, featuring Samuel L. Jackson as the speaker. And it is an Oscar-nominated documentary based on James Baldwin, the famous African-American writer and commentator and social activist. It's an unfinished manuscript that he wrote called Remember This House, which this is based on. It's a stirring personal account of the lives and deaths of his friends Medgar Evers, who I didn't know much about, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. It's a very unique documentary, but as you're saying, it points to that very clear resonance between those times and these times we're now living through, especially this couple of weeks since George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, and the reactions to that around the world.
Absolutely. I watched this documentary just recently and was quite disturbed to see the remarkable similarities in terms of particularly racially motivated unrest. There's an image there, I think it's from the 1960s, of a policeman kneeling on the neck of a black person.
Yes, exactly. It was shocking. It brought me to tears immediately. It's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, quite remarkable.
And you can look at that as like, well, nothing's changed, and look at it very negatively, which is a fair enough interpretation of that. But hopefully you can see a deeper thing going on there, that then, of course, because there was success in those civil movements in the 60s, just there was with the feminist movement, of course, at the time, the political movement against Vietnam, and the movement for psychedelic drugs at that time, of course, psychedelic medicines, as we now call them. So those movements did actually have success and effect at that time, but there was the first generation, and now we're at sort of like the next layer up on the spiral and ready to approach these things with perhaps a bit more of a deeper understanding of what's going on and a better value system, perhaps.
That's right, and just like the waves running up the beach, as the tide's coming in, we saw this flare up, and there, as you say, there certainly was progress made across many of those issues back at that time, but then the wave ran back down the beach again, and it's really important to keep that big picture perspective on this change and that wave-like emergence, where it will look good for a while, then it will look like it's going backwards, and it will look good, again, and a little bit better when the next wave comes in. And so we just have to trust in that overall large pattern of the tide actually coming in, and from my perspective, that is certainly the case. And this time, we're very close to the high tide mark, so I truly believe sometime within the next 10 years or so we're going to see the modern scientific industrial era and its social systems collapse to a point where they really won't be functional anymore, and there will be new systems, more evolved and more capable systems in their place.
I think one of the quotes, I wrote a few quotes down here. We have one we might play as well from James Baldwin himself around the early 60s, but he said some amazing things in this documentary, doesn't he? They have his voice as he speaks in various times during his lifelong work. But he said at one point, which really struck me, people can't bear very much reality. They prefer fantasy. He's talking about Americans in particular, but I think it applies pretty much across the Western world. Yep. They prefer fantasy. They have enough reality to bear already, just getting by, just living life conditions. I think it's a very interesting comment. Just that it's a simple comment, but it goes to that, that denial that the white person in particular, with regards to the other, to the black other in this country, in the USA, of course. It goes to that denial and just turning away, just not seeing, not looking. And in our history books, the misreporting, the unreporting, the non-reporting of those affairs in this country, in Australia, that's certainly true, as we both grew up here, knowing very little about our Indigenous people. So there's a blindness there that comes from people's basically not wanting to face these things, simply.
Absolutely, and it's tied to the value systems and their perspective. And as we were saying earlier, you have, when you're immersed in one of these value systems, a particular perspective that you're seeing the world from, and there are things that you won't be able to see, and it won't be possible for you to see from that particular place.
There's some rain out there. Beautiful. You may be hearing this. We could stop, folks, but I think it's actually okay.
Yeah, it sounds like a bit of static and noise in the background, but it's just beautiful, heavy rain.
We love the rain here in the Northern Rivers of New South Wales. Those of you who know this region in Australia, if you've been here or you're listening from here, we just love getting the rain here. It's a very green region, and when it rains like this, everybody just goes, yeah.
Getting back to James Baldwin, what he's saying there about, some people can't face reality, he's most likely speaking from layer 6, from what I saw of him in that documentary. And so he's talking about people from the previous layers, layer 3, 4 and 5, and without a full understanding of these layers of value systems, he's just making the observation that some people don't want to see what I can see.
Yes.
Yeah. And the truth of it is that some of those people aren't able to see what you can see if you're operating from a different value system, because you simply have a different sensory perception. We
might play this little piece from him which refers a bit to this, about the 1/9 of the population of the US, which is African-American basis, and the denial of participation refers to kind of what we're saying. So let's have a little listen to this piece from James Baldwin about 1963, and we think this was spoken perhaps in Cambridge in the UK, because he spent a lot of time in France and he spoke at some of the universities at that time there. So this is James Baldwin.
It is a terrible thing for an entire people to surrender to the notion that 1/9 of its population is beneath them. And until the moment comes when we, the Americans, we, the American people, are able to accept the fact that I have to accept, for example, that my ancestors are both white and black, that on that continent we are trying to forge a new identity for which we need each other, and that I am not a ward of America. I am not an object of missionary charity. I am one of the people who built the country. Until this moment, there is scarcely any hope for the American dream, because the people who are denied participation in it, by their very presence, will wreck it. And if that happens, it's a very grave moment for the West. Thank you.
James Baldwin there, and very salient remarks indeed.
And you can hear him there calling for inclusion and this idea that everybody should have equal access, social justice issues, which is very much a layer 6 theme, and a wonderful, wonderful piece there by James Baldwin, I must say.
Indeed.
So, moving forward from where we are now, we can see, I guess, straight away that when if you're watching the news and you're seeing what's going on and the kind of themes that are playing out around the world with social unrest at the moment, they are the same themes that were playing out in the 1960s, and they're being seen from a very, very similar perspective, because this is about people waking up to layer 6 values, waking up to the reality that, of the separation within society that has been created by layer 5 systems.
And you could exchange segregation for separation in that terminology right there.
Absolutely. And, again, as we said before, this narrowing of focus and specialization within narrow fields on a social scale plays out as separation or segregation for various reasons. And this was just a fundamental characteristic of that particular way of being human, the layer 5 way. And so in order to solve the problems created by that separation and segregation now, we need to move back in the opposite direction, and we need to integrate. And that needs to happen right across the scale, across every industry and every social sector. We need that integration, and it's very much seen as a rebalancing of something that has got out of balance from that layer 6 perspective.
Those of you who are familiar with these issues may well know of Jane Elliott and the blue eyes, brown eyes exercise. I only just came across it myself with looking at research for today. And for those who do know, you'll know that in 1968, in response to the assassination of Martin Luther King, Jane Elliott, a white woman, devised a controversial and startling blue eyes, brown eyes exercise. This now famous exercise labels participants as inferior or superior based solely upon the colour of their eyes, and exposes them to the experience of being a minority. Everyone who is exposed to Jane Elliott's work, be it through a lecture, a workshop, a video, is dramatically affected by it. And I think it's very telling, just that simple fact that you can just assign by some physical difference a superiority or an inferiority to a group of people, to kids in this case, or to anybody, and they will actually experience that. They will feel it, because it's that easy to be educated to hate somebody, unfortunately, and that's really where we have to make the integration beginning at childhood in our education system, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's great. And of course, over the last few decades, there's been a lot of things creeping into the education system, and particularly around environmental awareness and those sorts of things, which reflect the emergence of layer 6 values and the shifting, importance away from being personally successful and having lots of money to taking into account all of these other issues which have been put out of balance through the scientific industrial era. And I guess, again, a common theme during our show over the last couple of years has been the fact that we need to start creating more resilient local communities. And generally this global shift is very much about just moving back to community, because community has been in many, many cases weakened and pulled apart by the way of living associated with the era that is now coming to a close. So the COVID-19 crisis, of course, has really pointed out clearly to me the faults in systems that we've been created that have become totally profit-driven. And to the point where that drive for success through profit has actually eclipsed the fundamental reason that the systems were designed in the first place, which, in other words, to look after people. And you can take any social system as an example, but the medical system is a wonderful one and very appropriate for this particular pandemic issue. Is how difficult was it during the last few months to know who to listen to in the face of conflicting advice of, okay, yeah, you should wear a mask, no, you shouldn't wear a mask, you should wait for a vaccine, or no, the vaccines are no good, and experts being rolled out in the mainstream media and social media, who would very, very clearly put a strong argument for both cases, which actually contradict each other, and where does that leave us? And that problem of fake news has largely been created by this profit-seeking agenda, which has come out of the Layer 5 era. And the emergence of eras over the very, very long term, the new era always solves the problems which were created by the old era, but then over time, simply living life one particular way creates new problems because of the emerging complexity. And so each era goes through a life cycle which is at first constructive, but then eventually becomes deconstructive. And the era, the systems and way of living associated with each era actually start to deconstruct themselves because of the problems they're creating are worse than the problems they're trying to solve.
And it's a good way, as we've said a few times on this show, to see that as compost. We're creating compost of the old value system, of the old structures, rather than trying to fix them as they are and put Band-Aids on them or destroy them. I mean, some destruction is going to happen, and who knows how that's going to happen. That's another story, perhaps, one could say, but certainly the notion that they are collapsing, and to see it, for me anyway, to see it as compost and that the new is arising out of that compost, I think is a fairly healthy way to see it.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. So at this time, as we think about how to re-emerge and how to re-engage with the world, there is a huge opportunity lying before us to actually change the way we do things. And I think for most people, what really is in their face is that, having been released from what we like to call the rat race of that daily commute, and then working in a place, many people don't have the opportunity to actually work in a job that they're extremely passionate about. Some of us do, thank goodness. But to be released from the need to do that in order to simply survive, and is that the way that we want to live in the future? And of course, it's not the way that human evolution is taking us. Human evolution is taking us in a different direction, because the era, that particular way of living has run its life cycle and is now really, in some cases, more harmful than it is useful.
I've got a lovely piece here. I think it's kind of appropriate from the wisdom of Bill Mollison, who's one of the creators, of course, of permaculture. And it's speaking really exactly to what you're saying here. And I think also what these points that he's made, and this is obviously some time ago, are really relevant, because it's exactly how many of us have had to become or start to think about becoming in this era of COVID-19. So he makes a few points here. I'll maybe just truncate them slightly. Number one, learn to plant not only an orchard but also basic crops and trees, fruit and so forth. 2, create a bond with some land, whether it's yours or that of a relative, a project, a community garden. Participate with the people who live there. Go gradually looking for ways to spend more time in the countryside than in the city. Learn to plant and purify water, treat organic waste and heal in nature, and so on. Develop practical skills, cooking, carpentry, machine repair, food processing and so forth. Teach these skills to your children. 4, seek a mutual support group where people take care of each other. Make products of basic need collectively, such as natural hygiene products, natural remedies and so forth. 5, simplify your life now, releasing more space and time. Discover everything you can do without money. Walk, exercise, craft, body arts, socialize, and so forth. 6, separate from the logic of consuming more and more. Prefer handmade products that last a long time. Quality made by small producers, social companies and solidarity economic companies and so forth. 7, exchange, store, multiply and spread seeds, Creole seeds he calls them here, which are native, non-genetically modified and produced by popular and family farming. And lastly, number 8, recognise that life will be much better afterwards. We're just transitioning. And he quotes, the quote he has here is, our creativity is the limit of the system. I like that. Our creativity is the limit of the system, and probably don't think that your creativity has any limits would be a good place to start, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's great work by Bill.
Yeah.
And he's talking there really about these themes that are associated with the emergence of the new value set. I think one of the things that really stood out for me in the COVID-19 response was the amount of fear that was created, and in some cases even officially encouraged, to be fearful. And I think that's entirely unnecessary. And in fact, fear responses often create more problems, unfortunately. And so if we are able to now understand that this disruption that we've been through is going to happen again, it may not be related to a pandemic, it may be related to something completely different, perhaps a climate-related issue, for example, or something else.
I mean, coming down to that notion of fear, because talking about Graves's work, as we move to the end of the first tier in Graves's work, which is layer 6 we've been talking about today, that movement into layer 6, before we move to the next layer, which is over the momentous leap, as he called it, into the second tier of consciousness in layers 7 and 8 by his identification at the time that he did that research. And as we said earlier, we'll go on and on. But the quality that needs to be let go of to make that bigger leap, the two main words there are fear and compulsion. So it would seem as we move more solidly and more and quickly into layer 6 at this time, especially when we've got things like COVID-19 and other crises coming upon us, that it's giving us a really good chance to deal with our fear and compulsion, because it's right at us, isn't it? And
absolutely.
That's the thing.
Yeah, and from a layer 6 perspective, the way that we can deal with that, bearing in mind that in that transition from 6 to 7, it naturally recedes as an influencer. But within layer 6, which is what has really been built on a large scale at the moment, and is still in its early days, it's a matter of coming together with a trusted network of people, a trusted community of people, and that's how we address our fear, is by knowing that, okay, we have each other and we have capable people within our community who know what they're doing, and they're able to help us out if, for example, our supply chains get disrupted again. And knowing that we have local sources of food and energy, for example, going to go a long way to addressing fears.
I was going to bring you some bok choy today, but I forgot to pull it out of the garden. I've got all this bok choy.
Really?
Or pak choy, so it's the same thing, actually.
Yeah,
I didn't know that, but it is.
Yeah, there you go. Very nice. This rain will be good for it.
Yeah.
So what we need to do at the moment is turn our focus to building resilient local communities, with the understanding that this disruption is going to come again in some other form, perhaps. It may or may not be another pandemic sometime over the next 10 years, but there certainly will be other disruptions, because we're living in a world where the systems that we've relied on to sustain us and supply us are in the process of gradual collapse. And we haven't really yet understood the economic impact of the coronavirus response, which I feel is much more serious than most people really understand just yet. But that will play itself out over the next few months and years as we try to return to normal and find that some things maybe, don't go back to normal at all, but are in fact broken permanently and need to be replaced with more capable systems. So turning our mind to local communities and the local provision of the necessities of life, including simple things like electricity, like supply chains, and we have the new technologies coming now, like 3D printers, for example, which allow us to locally produce a whole bunch of things that have traditionally been made for the last 100 or 200 years in far off places and travel a long way on ships to get to us. How good would it be if we have a specialist 3D printing centre in our local village that can really print anything that we can provide digital plans for? So those sorts of things. And using the security and the emotional benefit that comes from knowing that you're part of a supportive and cooperative community, to address fear within the local community and address it through practically demonstrating that we can cope as a local community, regardless of how bad things get. Then you're going to avoid some of the really silly things that happen, like the panic buying of things that there was no actual reason to panic buy, in the early stages of the COVID-19 thing, which they just add to the problems. You've got the fundamental problem, which is a pandemic, but then you've got a shortage of toilet paper as well, which just puts people under extra stress.
I just going back a bit, you're talking about finding simpler ways of living, for example, which was also one of those points in Bill Mollison's piece there too, that sort of idea. But it made me think about the term life conditions itself, which is key to Graves' work. The impulse to move comes from the change in life conditions, a movement in life conditions. But that can easily be interpreted as purely economic conditions by some people, but of course it's not. And many of us now, including myself, are living in a very simple way, but actually my life conditions are quite great. So it's not about having more, because I think some people interpret that through, I guess, layer 5 more, like, that means for me to move forward and evolve, I need more of something.
I have to get a boat.
I have to get a boat. I have to get
exactly.
a boat. And a trip to Albuquerque.
Yeah,
I don't know why I said that, but that's a good place to go. Hello in Albuquerque, if you're listening.
Yeah, exactly. The term life conditions is an all-encompassing thing, so it's not just physical things; it's psychological things. It's also encompasses everything that influences us in the moment, such as our history and all of the psychological impact that has had on us, and all of the skills that we've learnt that help us do things. It's everything. So I'm just sort of skimming through some notes here about resilient communities, local cooperation and collaboration. And you can use the spiral, the collection of layers of consciousness that Graves mapped out, to help you think about all the things that you need as a community. Like at layer 1, you know, it's fundamental survival, hunter-gatherer type stuff there. So you need food, right? And you need to know that you can collaborate with other people and put together a meal on a sustainable basis, you know, for whatever time you need to, perhaps in the next lockdown, for whatever reason we have another lockdown. The layer 2, safety and security that, you know, the tribe brings, and all of the cultural richness that comes from the tribe, and knowing that there are people within the tribe who have specialties like healers and, you know, whatever else. You need to feel safe and secure within community, that very fundamental sort of family level.
Yeah, and a great resilience there, because of course we have that still in our societies largely, and we also sometimes romanticize those things because they feel good. I guess it's almost genetically that was a good time in our evolution. Yeah, somehow.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a particular resonance at the moment because we're moving into layer 6, which is communal again. We get that resonance from the previous communal systems, and particularly from that tribal layer 2. Layer 3, you know, the healthy expression of power within the community. You know, if the community needs to take action, you know, who are the leaders within the community that we can go to and say, look, this really needs to happen, and we know that they'll have the energy and the engagement and the practical skills to make things happen within the community. Layer 4, rules and structure, you know, having agreed rules and structure within a community, so then we know we can live peacefully with one another, and we have systems for resolving issues, and all of those structural things that really emerged during the agricultural era, the ordered ways of doing things, the formulas that we can rely on, tried and true. And then layer 5, you know, and even though we're moving beyond layer 5 at the moment, and there's a natural tendency for people at layer 6 to want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, it really doesn't help us to do that. You know, and a great example I can give you there is some technologies that have come from layer 5 can actually be really damn useful. And recently I've been talking to people about new farming methods and looking at these farming kits that you can buy now, which are like a packaged kit, and it comes with everything you need basically to lay out a garden bed, you know, to grow your veggies or whatever you want to do.
You could 3D print those for a start.
Well, you could. And then this little set of rails that you put down the side of the garden's bed, and a little computerized device that runs backwards and forwards, right? And it's got a camera in it, and you can program it through an app.
So you can be anywhere in the world and you can tend to your garden.
You can actually do that as long as you've got the internet. And so these things will automatically plant your garden for you, and then go and inspect your garden every day using this camera.
Now, I'm sure some people won't like that approach. I mean, some people in layer 6 are probably not going to like that, because it's all about getting your bare feet in the soil and your hands in the dirt and doing that thing, which I certainly love. So
I know, right? Interesting. You know, it frees up your time to do other things if you're just not a gardening kind of a person.
Fair enough. Not everybody needs to be a gardener.
And anyway, these computerized farming kits, they do the weeding. They actually using you know, the camera. They can look at the colour of the plant and then know that it needs a bit of fertiliser, it needs more water or whatever, or less water, and the whole damn thing. And it frees you up to talk to the plants, right? So if you're that way inclined, you can just sit back and
sing to the plants. Even
you
better.
don't have to do the weeding. You can just go and tell them how beautiful they are every day, and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, there are many,
and that works, folks. By the way,
there are many great technologies that have come out of the scientific industrial era, which we don't want to throw out.
And there is a tendency with green to throw out, as you said, the baby with the bathwater, and to throw out technology, because all technology is bad. Look at what it's done to the world. But as we've often said on this show, who created the technology? Who's using it? How's it used? And what purpose has it got? And that's all about humans doing that technology thing.
That's right. And all those discussions are often taking place on social media, which wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the technology, right? Anyway, so the point I'm making is that you can go through the layers and the different aspects of all of the layers in the spiral of human development, and each one will basically point you to, okay, how do we address that as a fundamental healthy building block of,
and as you said that, it was very clear to me as we move into 6, through 6 and beyond, that all of those parts of our human self are necessary. At times they need to be employed. So the basic stuff of layer 1, of layer 2, you're going to sometimes need to be those parts of yourself in terms of the whole being in a systematic response to the challenges that we have.
Exactly, because we are dynamic and we move
Yeah.
backwards and forwards between these layers, even though we have one, which is might be our central or dominant value system. Yeah. Just lastly, to finish up the show, I think I just want to make a comment about the role of civil protests at this time. And if we look back throughout history, we can see times when protest has been extremely useful in bringing about social change. So we must remember that, and we must learn from the lessons of the past. The history tells us that violence associated with civil protest doesn't work very well, and that was one aspect of what went on in the 1960s that didn't work well at all, and just created more problems. So
and detailed very well in that film, by the way, folks. If
Yeah.
you want to check that out, as we talked about.
Exactly.
I Am Not Your Negro. Yeah.
Exactly. But it because of the change that's going on and because of the uncertainty of the future, it is a time where we have more opportunity to influence our leaders to make changes to policies, make changes to systems and those sorts of things. And by gathering together in groups peacefully to make a point, we can actually go a long way right now. I think it's a very, very good time to be doing that, so long as it's done in a peaceful fashion and with due care and regard for everybody involved.
Because as you no doubt know, because you know this show, if you have 20,000 people marching, you're going to get those few people in that 20,000 possibly who are largely coming from a value system that may be a bit earlier, say a 3, for example, or a 4, and they see violence and aggression as a way to get results, or they see this is the only way to do how we're doing it, we must do it this way to get results, and it's not enough now.
Yeah, and that is one of the, I guess, the risks with organising protests at the moment, is that if somebody comes from a worldview where the world's a jungle and you've got to fight for everything, and they go into it with a sense of a fight, then that obviously can cause problems. And this is where we need mature leaders within the community to proactively hose down in a sort of a, not in a literal sense, but in an emotional sense, any too much fire, I guess, is what I'm trying to say within those who are involved in the protest, so that we can make a point, we can make it en masse, but we can make it peacefully.
I must say, I won't go into this, but I have a 4-page printout here that I found on social media of all the results that have happened in the 10 days of sustained protests around the world. And there's some very good points made here. Perhaps I'll send this to you. We can post this up on one of our platforms for people to have a look at.
Sure, that's great. Excellent. So I think to wrap up, we'll just talk briefly about what's next. From an economic point of view, we know that the global economy and all of the sub-economies in nations and towns around the world has taken a tremendous hit from the response to COVID-19, and I am sure that we haven't really understood the full impact of that just yet. Martin Armstrong, who we often quote as one of our sources, is urging extreme caution at this time. In fact, the patterns that he's seeing in the global markets right now are quite extraordinary, and he's written that he hasn't seen these sorts of patterns in any economic activity since the late 1700s. So what we can be sure of is that there's some extreme changes going on within the global economy at the moment. We know for a fact that this economic system was designed by Layer 5, therefore it is destined to collapse sometime in the not too distant future. And so extreme caution is urged at this stage. We also need to be proactively thinking about what's next. And of course, as we've said many times on the show, decentralized, encrypted electronic systems seem to be playing some role in the emerging new systems. Perhaps the only downside of those that we can see at the moment is that they rely on the internet and electricity to operate, and sometimes you need something that you can stick in your pocket and walk around with. So what comes out of that in the future, we're not sure, but watch and see. One
of the things you pointed to this morning, which we had a quick look at and just mentioned, is a piece from a couple of days ago in thelily.com, I've never come across before, which is about a feminist economic recovery plan in Hawaii. The state wants to build a system that is capable of delivering gender equality. There's a wonderful photo with a couple of guys, 3 or 4 guys, and everybody else is women, and one obviously gorgeous female baby, no doubt. And there's a lot in this article, probably good for people to have a look at it themselves. Essentially, it's been created by a feminist economic recovery plan by the State's Commission on the Status of Women, designed for deep cultural change by explicitly incorporating the unique needs of Indigenous and immigrant women, caregivers, elderly women, femme identifying, haven't heard that expression before, there you go, femme identifying, and non-binary people, incarcerated women, unsheltered women, domestic abuse and sex trafficking survivors, and women with disabilities. So it's really taking, and Hawaii is a slightly unique place. It has an older population, it's a very diverse racial population, and it is actually the most, I didn't know this, the most expensive state in the US of A, so that would definitely work not in the favour of women just there, and also has the highest unemployment rate in the nation. So they're looking at a real new generation of a real new economic approach on a state basis in the US, and that's a really seems to be a very good movement. We'll see how it goes.
I think it's a great example of how different thinking is coming out of this period. You know, it's really forcing people to know. Or to notice, rather, you know, what's out of balance, and then to start to think about, okay, how can we fix that as we move forward? Yeah. Absolutely. Nick, have you got anything from current astrology which might give us an inkling as to what is coming down the track?
Well, I do. I just have to dig it out somewhere.
What we do know is that there have been predictions of civil unrest associated with the US elections, which of course are coming up in November, and the social and civil unrest within the US is all over the news at the moment. So I doubt very much whether there's going to be any resolution to those issues between now and the election, and it looks like the election is probably going to ramp up some of the activity going on there.
I don't have the astrological thing in front of me, which is the ephemeris. That's the word for where the planets are on any given day and time. But clearly, as we've talked about on the show before, this is a very big year astrologically. You already referred to how we spoke last year about civil unrest. This year came from a number of sources, but one of those was certainly astrology. And we looked actually at March and April, which we've seen right now, civil unrest in April, May, certainly, and the whole change through COVID-19, all the stuff we've been talking about. But we've got a continual dance between Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter, as well as other planets, some of those outer planets during this year through Capricorn into Aquarius, and that dance continues as we speak. We had a crisis period we've just been through with that. There's been a bit of a lull, but I think after the full moon and the eclipse that's just gone on, and I know that you had a strong time on the eclipse yourself, so did I. I think many people did. That there's a new sort of a new period, which I see as a bit of a build up into July, August. I suspect that we're going to see some, I don't know what's going to be, but some surprising things. We still don't, some out of left field, something that's going to come around, I'd say mid-July to August. And then, of course, the US elections in November is another key point where Jupiter and Pluto are conjunct in late Capricorn. That's a pretty unique moment there. I think Mars is also there that week, if I remember rightly. It's a very complex arrangement of planetary energies this year for those who are into that sort of thing, as a reflection and an indication of a mirror of what's actually happening out there.
Yeah. And I do feel that we're in a period of rolling disruption now that's going to go on for quite some time. And, you know, there are many fairly accurate indicators that we use that are pointing to ongoing disruptions, one after the other, that could stretch on for the next 10 or so years. And that doesn't mean to say it's going to be hectic the whole time, but it's a good time to stop and think about, okay, how do we cope with disruption? Are we good at doing that? What do we need to do, particularly in our local community, to help us cope with disruption better?
Yeah, beautiful. If we've got time, I just want to read this because it's relevant to everything, I think. It's a piece from Fred Lamotte. And it's funny, but it's also very salient. He says this: my ancestry DNA results came in. Have you seen this?
I haven't, no.
Yeah, my ancestry DNA results came in. Just as I suspected, my great-grandfather was a monarch butterfly. Much of who I am is still wriggling under a stone. I am part larva, but part hummingbird too. There's a dinosaur tar in my bone marrow. My golden hair sprang out of a meadow in Palestine. Genghis Khan is my fourth cousin, but I didn't get his dimples. My loins are loaded with banyan seeds from Sri Lanka, but I descended from Ravana, not Ram. My uncle is a mastodon. There are traces of white people in my saliva. 3.7 billion years ago, I swirled into golden dust, dreaming of a planet overgrown with lingams and yonis. More recently, say 60,000 BC, I walked on hairy paws across a land bridge joining Sweden to Botswana. I am the child of the sun and moon. I can no longer hide my heritage of raindrops and cougar scat. I am made of your grandmother's tears. You conquered rival tribesmen of your own colour, chained them together, marched them naked to the coast, and sold them to colonials from Savannah. I was the brother you sold. I was a slave trader. I was the chain. Admit it. You have wings, vast and golden, like mine, like mine. You have sweat, black and salty, like mine, like mine. You have secrets silently singing in your blood, like mine, like mine. Don't pretend that Earth is not one family. Don't pretend we never hung from the same branch. Don't pretend we don't ripen on each other's breath. Don't pretend we didn't come here to forgive.
Beautiful. And who was the author of that?
Fred Lamotte, Lamotte. It's popped up in social media the last week or so here all over the place. I think it's fantastic. And it really speaks to who we, arguably who we actually are, well, part of who we are, at least the Earth part of who we are.
Yeah, it's a nice theme for what's going on at the moment, for sure.
Indeed.
That's great. Well, I think we might wrap it there.
Wrap it there. Just to remind you folks, Future Sense, you can go to our podcasts at the moment from our RD website. That's AADII.org. The Future Sense website will be back up. We just have a small tech problem with that at the moment. You can also go to our Twitter account at Future Sense Show, and our Facebook page, which is Future Sense on Facebook. And since we're not doing the radio broadcast anymore, we can't take live text lines, but we're very interested in your questions and comments. So you can go to those platforms, either to Twitter or Facebook, and anything that you'd like to say to us, or any ideas that you've got, or anything that's been triggered here or bring our attention to, please do.
Awesome. Thanks very much. It's good to be back, and we'll return next week.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
You've been listening to Nick Jeans and Steve McDonald on Future Sense. You'll find our podcasts on the web at rd.org. That's AADII.org. We have a Facebook page called Future Sense, and you can find us on Twitter at Future Sense Show. Thanks for listening.